Welcome to Daily Brief YouTube channel. On the second day of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, new developments are happening every moment. The Russian army has put Kiev at the focal point of its target. According to the Ukrainian president's statement, Russian troops continue to advance from the north and east of Kiev. According to the Ukrainian army statement, Russian troops are within 18 miles of the capital. Ukraine's National Security Council said this morning at around 6:30 Ukrainian time that the situation in Kiev is still under the control of the army. It is reported that the internet connection has been cut off in the area. At the same time, clashes continue in Kakhovka. There are fierce clashes between Russian soldiers and armored forces and the Ukrainian armed forces in the region. The region, which is one of the Ukrainian connection points of Crimea, seems to have prevented the siege of Kiev from the south with its resistance. At the same time, the Ukrainian military announced in a statement that a Russian attack on a military base in Kiev was repelled. Some Russian troops from the east are reported to have infiltrated southwest of Kiev. The clashes of these troops with the Ukrainian armed forces in the southwestern region of Kiev were shared by the people living in the region via social media. At the same time, the Ukrainian armed forces are reported to have dug trenches and trenches on the streets of Kiev to protect Kiev. Although the United Nations, convening at night, made a decision to condemn Russia's attacks, this decision was annulled with Russia's veto. One of the biggest events of the day was the Ukrainian pilot who allegedly shot down 6 Russian warplanes. The fighter jet pilot, nicknamed the Ghost of Kiev in Ukraine, stands out as the legendary hero that Ukraine needs right now. Let's examine this case in depth. When such crisis situations occur, the public needs a hope, a hero, an activator and a trigger. On the second day, both Russia and Ukraine made serious claims about the casualties in the mutual air conflict, which continued intensely. So far, real tangible evidence of aircraft lost in the war, whether Russian or Ukrainian, has been limited, to say the least. Amidst this disorienting atmosphere, the story of Ghost of Kiev, a heroic Ukrainian MiG-29 Fulcrum fighter pilot who has allegedly amassed an astonishing death gang from the air, 6 so far, while defending his beloved capital city, has taken hold in an avalanche. The story sounds extremely fanciful. A single Ukrainian pilot, flying a jet that was completely outnumbered and classified by the Russian opposition, made audacious broad daylight flights over the capital and was legendary in the process by becoming ace in one day. Something that is finally known for certain. But at the moment, the only evidence of any of this is a series of videos showing real and supposed Ukrainian Air Force MiG-29s in Kiev and elsewhere. Confusing. Some of these videos were misreported as Russian-Ukrainian dogfights, actually showing pairs of Ukrainian planes, while others posted flight simulation clips on social media and made similar claims. Most aircraft loss claims made by both parties, almost without exception, were not supported by photos or videos, or even verified by trusted third parties. Known exceptions that include fixed-wing aircraft as opposed to helicopters include a Ukrainian Air Force and 26 Kuril transport aircraft and a Ukrainian Su-27 flanker fighter jet. The latter was apparently shot down during the fighting in Kiev last night and was probably responsible for the massive fireball seen in the sky above the capital. The Russian Ministry of Defense says that this jet was accidentally shot down by the Ukrainian air defense, while Ukraine says it was a Russian missile that shot down the plane. Either way, neither of these two confirmed aircraft losses helps to explain the Phantom of Kiev. Indeed, in its current form, we have no endorsement of any Russian fixed-wing military aircraft shot down over Ukraine, whether as a result of warplanes, ground-based air defense systems, mechanical failure or pilot error. Open Source Intelligence, OSINT, expert Stein Mitzer, who runs a blog tracking casualties on both sides, claims that as of yesterday, Russian losses amounted to a Su-30SM flanker fighter jet destroyed on the ground in an apparent Ukrainian missile strike. Milarovo Air Base in Russia, a Su-25 Frogfoot ground attack aircraft and an An-26 transport. The An-26 crashed in Voronezh, Russia, and it is unclear whether it was in Ukrainian airspace or whether it was shot down by enemy action. In addition, the Pentagon assesses that Russia has not achieved air superiority and that Ukraine still has a significant air defense capability. But what we do not have is the confirmation of Russian warplanes lost to the Ukrainian defense, proof that such losses can be directly attributed to a Ukrainian MiG-29 pilot. That could of course change, but the growing number of planes supposedly crashing into the missiles and guns of the Phantom of Kiev requires much more evidence before it comes close to being taken seriously. At the end of February 25, unconfirmed sources claimed that at least 6 Russian warplanes had been shot down by the Phantom of Kiev in 24 hours, 2 Su-35s, 1 Su-27, 1 MiG-29, and 2 Su-25s. When we look at the activities of the warplanes, it is certainly a possibility for the Ukrainian MiG-29 pilot to shoot down 2 Su-35s, but it is a very imaginary possibility. In other words, we can explain how we can hardly imagine something like shooting down 2 F-35s with an F-16 jet. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine claimed that as of today 10 fixed-wing aircraft and 7 helicopters have been destroyed. For some of these aircraft types, such as the Su-35, there is not even conclusive evidence that these aircraft are active over Ukraine. It remains possible that they have not yet implemented high sortie rates in or above Ukrainian territory. There is also the question of how appropriate it would be for a pilot to take part in the number of sorties needed to achieve this awesome total. The basic MiG-29 can carry a maximum of 6 air-to-air missiles and 150 rounds of 30mm ammunition. Its notoriously limited range, especially at low level, allows relatively little time to patrol the station. This means multiple sorties that require one or more aircraft to be armed, refueled, put into service, and then assigned to the same pilot. While in the air, the pilot in question needs to be lucky enough to encounter the right targets at the right time and survive each encounter. And there are many more unknown variables. And then they would need all their weapons to work as advertised, getting a much better than normal kill probability. Any way you look at it, it's a very, very long shot, bordering on utter illogicality. For the record, it is worth noting that the MiG-29 squadron of the Ukrainian Air Force was located in pre-invasion times, at Vasilkiv in the Kiev Oblast of central Ukraine, and at Ivano-Frankivsk in western Ukraine. Ivano-Frankivsk suffered heavy Russian missile bombardment in the opening hours of the war, and Vasilkiv was reportedly hit as well. While the operational status of these bases and onboard aircraft is at least questionable, it is likely that the aircraft may have moved to other locations prior to the first round of Russian attacks. It is clear that there is a strong desire to believe in the reality of the Ghost of Kiev legend. Of course, the Ukrainian people need this kind of moral strength under the severe Russian pressure, but they should not push the limits of logic. Stories like the Ghost of Kiev certainly help to bring the nation and its many supporters around the world together in the face of dire odds. The sighting of Ukrainian MiG-29s and other jets patrolling the country's skies also plays an important morale booster role and ties back to the heroic pilot narrative. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine also began to stir the story with a tweet referring to the Air Avenger on the MiG-29, which is very often seen by the Kievites. Choosing a person, even if they remain anonymous, can be a particularly powerful propaganda tool. This is something we've seen before in this conflict. For example, when a Ukrainian woman encounters heavily armed Russian soldiers before she wants to know what they are doing in her country.